What if I told you that the reason a literal lizard in the Australian outback is suddenly changing its physical sex is, well, it's directly tied to the exact gravitational blind spot in space where NASA just parked its newest telescope?
I mean, it sounds like the setup to a really bad science fiction novel or, a very strange joke.
Right. But according to the massive stack of sources we are looking at today for this deep dive, it is neither. It's real.
Yeah, very real.
And if you are listening to this right now, you have probably felt a certain kind of, I don't know, disorientation when looking at the news lately.
Vertigo.
Exactly, vertigo. You look at extreme climate events just popping up out of nowhere. You see the merging of humans with artificial intelligence, these massive shifts in biological and gender norms, just total societal upheaval, right?
Right. And you might step back and wonder, are we at the end of an era?
Yes, because usually when you feel disoriented, there's a clear cause. Like you step off a roller coaster, your head spins, and you can point to the ride and say, well, that is why. Today, we are attempting to point at the ride.
We are looking at a systemic civilizational vertigo here. And the big question is whether all these things, the climate, the biology, the crazy tech, are they just random crises piling up? Or is there a deeper underlying mechanism at play?
And our sources today are pointing us toward a deeply ancient cosmological concept called the Prakriti Yuga Chakra.
Right. Specifically, they're mapping out a transition into what's called the end time of change of yugas.
Which brings us to the rise of something called a vipreet veda.
Yes.
The vipreet veda translates roughly to a reversed order, right? Like a complete reversal of nature and society under the influence of a cosmic entity known as Rahu.
That is the core premise, yeah. What we're doing today is taking this incredibly ancient framework and laying it directly over modern empirical data.
Right.
We're going to look at climate history, evolutionary biology, and cutting-edge bioengineering to see if modern science is, well, inadvertently proving this ancient model to be true.
And I should probably note right at the top, just to set the stage, our sources touch on some intensely debated modern topics today, from gender identity to political history.
Yeah, we are not here to take sides.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
We're not endorsing any political viewpoints. We are treating this as an archaeological dig into human behavior and biology, just impartially observing these massive shifts as sociobiological adaptations.
Exactly. So to start this dig, we really need to understand the clock we are reading.
Puranas, right?
Right. The Puranas are these incredibly dense ancient Indian texts, and they describe 3 distinct cycles of time, or Yuga chakras.
Okay, let's unpack these. So first, there's the Divya Yuga Chakra.
Yeah, which is a 12,000-year cycle based on the solar system, and it's governed by what they call Dev Tattva, or divine elements.
Okay, and then there's the big one?
The millions of years Yuga chakra,
Yeah.
That one spans 4.32 million years, governed by Purush Tattva, where the model says the sun is actually stationary and the earth moves.
But the third one, the one we are zeroing in on today.
This is the Prakriti Yuga chakra. This one is unique because it dictates the rise and fall of human civilizations based on Earth's cosmic position relative to other celestial bodies.
With Earth acting as the focal point, right?
Exactly. When the Earth is perfectly centered in this cosmic arrangement and expanding, that is Satya Yuga.
Okay.
When the sun is closest to the Earth, we are in Treta Yuga. When the moon is closest, we shift into Dwapar Yuga. And finally, when Rahu is closest, we enter Kaliyuga.
Wait, I need to stop you there.
Sure.
Because in popular mythology, Rahu is depicted as a severed demon head that flies through space and swallows the sun during an eclipse.
Right, the classic imagery.
Yeah. So how does a mythological demon head cause an era of global chaos?
Well, the ancient texts are using metaphorical language to describe a very real astrophysical phenomenon.
Okay, I'm listening.
Our sources highlight a specific definition here. Rahu is described in the texts as a shadow planet. It's a node. And in modern astrophysics, this corresponds remarkably well to something called the L2 Lagrange point.
The Lagrange point. Wait, this is the exact physical gravitational blind spot in space where we just parked the James Webb Space Telescope.
That is exactly right. Think of it like drafting behind a semi-truck on the highway.
Oh, okay.
When you're on a highway, the wind hits the truck, and right behind it, there is this pocket of calm air where the drag is basically suspended.
Right, you get pulled along.
Yeah, in space, a Lagrange point is a position where the gravitational pull of 2 large masses, in this case, the sun and the Earth, precisely equals the centripetal force required for a small object to move with them.
Right.
And the L2 point is directly behind the Earth. It's always in its shadow, shielded from the sun's direct glare.
So, wait, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Are you saying that a mathematical point in empty space, a literal pocket of suspended gravity, physically dictates human behavior and biological evolution on
I
Earth?
know, it's a massive leap.
It's a huge leap. How do the sources bridge a gravitational shadow with human society?
Well, the texts describe Rahu's orbit as a dust-filled path, like a realm of disruption and shattering. The sources argue that as Earth's alignment shifts closer to the influence of this point, it alters our celestial environment,
Meaning what, exactly?
meaning it changes our solar radiation, our orbital mechanics. And when we map the timeline of this Prakriti Yuga chakra onto empirical climate and biological data,
Yeah.
the parallels become incredibly difficult to ignore. We are looking at how physical changes in our celestial environment trigger these massive compounding chain reactions down here on Earth.
Okay, so if this cosmic clock is real, it should leave a fossil record in our history.
It absolutely does.
Because to understand the chaos we are in right now, heading into the peak of Kaliyuga, Rahu's domain, we really need to look at how past Yuga transitions played out.
Right. These transition eras are known as the Yuga Parivartan, and they leave profound scars on the historical record.
Scars like what?
They are almost universally marked by cataclysmic climate change and total societal collapse. Consider the end of the Trek-Dwapar transition.
Okay, remind me, in the cosmic model, when does that happen?
This occurs when the sun is moving away and the moon is coming closer. And historically, the timeline of this shift aligns perfectly with the global crisis of 536 AD.
Oh man, 536 AD. Historians frequently cite this as the literal worst year to be alive in human history.
Yeah, worse than 1918, worse than 1349.
Which is saying something, so what exactly happened?
Well, the scientific evidence from ice cores in Greenland and tree ring data from places as far apart as Ireland and Mongolia, they all point to a massive volcanic eruption.
Like super volcano massive.
Huge, possibly in Iceland or the Americas. This event injected millions of tons of sulfur dioxide straight into the stratosphere.
Wow.
And when sulfur dioxide reacts with water vapor up there, it creates sulfate aerosols. These aerosols basically act like tiny mirrors in the atmosphere, reflecting solar radiation back into space.
It essentially turns the Earth into a giant, cloudy mirror.
Exactly. For 18 months, the sun was physically blocked. Yeah. The Byzantine historian Procopius actually wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness like the moon all year long. It was a global volcanic winter.
That is terrifying.
Temperatures plummeted by up to 2.5 degrees Celsius globally. There are records of summer snow falling in China.
Summer snow.
Yeah. Crops completely failed across the entire northern hemisphere.
But the physical climate shock was just the first domino, right? Because a few cold summers don't completely rewrite a civilization.
No, but when a civilization's foundational resource, in this case agriculture, vanishes overnight, a brutal socio-biological chain reaction begins.
Because everyone starts starving.
Right. The immediate result was mass starvation, which severely weakened the global population's immune systems.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Yeah, the systemic biological vulnerability basically rolled out the red carpet for the Justinian plague in 541 AD, which was caused by the Yersinia pestis bacterium.
And the plague didn't just kill people, it physically ravaged them. The accounts describe agonizing buboes, delirium, just a complete breakdown of the medical understanding of the time.
It wiped out up to 50% of the population in the Byzantine Empire and across Europe. And this is where we see the societal inversion happening.
The early signs of a vipreet veda.
Exactly. The sources draw on the accounts of John of Ephesus, a historian who witnessed the aftermath. The traditional patriarchal centralized systems just completely collapsed.
Human empathy practically vanished under the trauma. I mean, the sources highlight these horrifying accounts of mothers abandoning their infected babies in the streets.
Yeah, because the maternal instinct was completely overridden by the biological terror of infection.
That is so dark. There are records of infants trying to nurse from mothers who had already died in their homes. It was a total breakdown of the natural family order due to extreme psychological and physical trauma.
And the thing is, we see the exact same pattern of environmental shock leading to societal inversion during the earlier Sakyatrita transition.
Which corresponds to what era?
The 4.2 kill-a-year event around 2200 BC.
Oh, I have read a bit about this. This wasn't a sudden volcano, though, right? It was a slow, suffocating, multi-century megadrought.
Right. Paleoclimatologists track it back to a shift in global ocean currents and the complete failure of the Asian monsoon patterns.
So the rain just stopped.
Completely. The Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia, which relied entirely on predictable rainfall for its agricultural surplus, was financially and physically starved.
And it wasn't just them.
No, the Old Kingdom in Egypt collapsed, and the Indus Valley civilization was fundamentally disrupted.
The Egyptian record of this collapse is utterly wild. Our sources mention a papyrus called the Admonitions of Ippur.
Yes.
It doesn't just describe a drought, it describes a total societal flip.
Mhm.
It literally says the elites were in rags begging for food and former servants were suddenly ruling.
The world turned upside down.
Literally. It describes the rivers running with blood, crocodiles gorging on the dead, infants being abandoned in the streets again. It is a complete inversion of the established divine order they had lived under for centuries.
And these historical compounding crises, they serve as a mechanical template. When a highly centralized, rigid society faces an unprecedented environmental shock, it lacks the elasticity to bend.
So it just breaks.
It just breaks. The crisis only resolves when the old, resource-heavy systems are completely destroyed, forcing humanity to adopt decentralized, highly adaptable, and honestly, sometimes extreme survival strategies.
So let me ask you this. Are these historical compounding crises essentially nature forcing humanity into a hard reset to prepare us for the next yuga?
That is what the framework suggests, yeah.
Because according to the timeline in our sources, the current Dwapara Kali transition, the move toward Rahu's full influence and this era of machines and shadows that began around 1643.
Right. And 1643 aligns with the dawn of the Enlightenment, the rise of modern empirical science, massive ideological shifts, and the early rumblings of modern democracy.
Wow. Okay.
It was the beginning of a profound shift away from the agrarian, king-centric models of the past.
And the sources predict this transition period is slated to end exactly around 2022 to 2032 or 2033.
Which lands us precisely in our current decade.
Right now.
Right now, we are witnessing extreme global climate shifts, escalating global conflicts, and rather poetically, the exact window when humanity launched the James Webb Telescope to permanently sit at the L2 Lagrange point.
Rahu's domain.
Exactly. The texts warn that as we fully enter Kaliyuga, the natural and social order will undergo a total vipreet veda.
Okay, but if we are talking about a reversal of the natural order, we cannot just look at human politics, right? Politics are downstream from biology.
Absolutely.
If this is a fundamental law of the Prakriti Yuga Chakra, we should see this reversal in nature first. We should see the animal kingdom hitting the panic button.
And that is the crazy part. The animal kingdom is currently demonstrating exactly what the ancient texts described.
Okay, give me some examples.
Well, when extreme environmental stress is applied to an ecosystem, fundamental biological switches, specifically regarding gender and reproduction, are flipping in real time.
Like a fail-safe.
It is nature's ultimate fail-safe mechanism.
Let's talk about the specific mechanics of this, because the data in the sources on temperature-dependent sex determination, or TSD, is fascinating.
It really is.
There is a species called the painted turtle. And unlike humans, who rely on X and Y chromosomes to determine biological sex from the moment of conception, the painted turtle's genetic sex is determined by the temperature of the sand while the egg is incubating.
Right. The mechanism is tied to an enzyme called aromatase, which basically converts testosterone into estrogen.
Okay.
When the sand is cool, the aromatase is inactive, and the hatchlings develop as male.
Makes sense.
But the data shows that if the average temperature of the nest rises by just 1.85 to 2 degrees Celsius, the aromatase enzyme goes into absolute overdrive.
And what happens?
The resulting hatchlings are born 100% female.
Wait, if the temperature rises by 4 degrees, male production completely ceases.
Exactly. It is a localized demographic collapse driven purely by thermal stress.
But the implications become even more extreme when we look beyond simple temperature-dependent incubation. Like, consider the central bearded dragon in the Australian outback.
Yeah, this one is wild. Under normal conditions, they have a genetic sex determination system similar to birds.
Meaning they have sex chromosomes.
Right. ZZ chromosomes make a genetic male. ZW chromosomes make a genetic female.
So they have hardwired genetics just like we do.
Under normal temperatures, yes. But when these eggs are exposed to temperatures between 34 and 37 degrees Celsius, a profound biological override occurs.
An override.
The genetic ZZ males, the ones hardwired by their chromosomes to be male, they undergo a full sex reversal.
Okay, hold on. How does heat physically change a creature's sex if the chromosomes are already set in stone?
It comes down to RNA splicing.
Okay, explain that for us.
Imagine RNA as a recipe book that tells the cell how to build the animal.
Got it.
Under normal temperatures, the cell reads the recipe for a male using the instructions from the ZZ chromosomes. But when the temperature hits that 34 to 37 degree threshold, the intense heat physically alters how the RNA is processed.
Like it warps the book.
Basically, yeah. The pages of the recipe book essentially stick together. The cell is forced to skip the chapter containing the proteins needed for male test development.
Wow.
And without those proteins, the default pathway kicks in and they develop ovaries instead.
So they transform into fully functional reproductive females despite having male chromosomes.
Yes. But the biological mutation is only part of the story. Their behavior is the crucial piece of evidence for the vipreet veda.
Because they don't act like normal females.
Not at all. These genetically male, physically female dragons do not act like standard ZW females. They exhibit hyper-aggressive, extremely bold behavior.
Oh.
They take greater risks. They fight harder for resources. The environmental extreme has created a completely reversed biological reality to ensure the species can adapt to the harsh heat.
Even though this boldness makes them more vulnerable to predators, right?
Exactly. It's a high-risk survival strategy.
It is like nature has a built-in safe mode. When the motherboard gets too hot, it stops running the traditional programs. It boots up experimental reverse software just to keep the system from totally crashing.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly, and this safe mode is being triggered not just by heat, but by the combination of thermal stress and modern environmental toxins.
Right, our sources touch on aquatic life, too. Researchers studying roach and minnow fish in the UK, Japan, and the United States have found some crazy stuff.
Yeah, the sources mention endocrine-disrupting chemicals, specifically agricultural runoff containing atrazine, which is a really common herbicide, and synthetic estrogens from human wastewater.
How does that affect the fish?
Well, when rising water temperatures stress the fish, their biological defenses drop, making them incredibly susceptible to these chemicals in the water. Atrazine, for instance, artificially spikes that aromatase enzyme we talked about earlier.
The same one in the turtles?
The exact same one. And the result is that the genetically male fish begin overproducing egg yolk proteins.
The condition literally turns them intersex. I mean, the sources detail how they start developing female eggs directly inside their male tests, and their reproductive tracts become totally feminized.
Right. And this biological reversal severely drops their fertility and threatens the local population with sudden collapse. The environmental stress is fundamentally scrambling their reproductive identity.
And we see this suppression happening behaviorally as well, not just biologically.
Oh, definitely. Look at the little bustard, which is an endangered bird in Europe.
Yeah, they rely on a highly complex, energy-intensive mating display at specific gathering sites called leks, right?
Exactly. The males puff up their necks, they strut around, and they make a very specific snort call to attract females.
It is a massive display of physical fitness.
It is. But the sources note that when the ambient temperature hits 31 degrees Celsius, they simply stop.
They just stop mating.
Completely. The thermal stress forces the bird into a brutal calculus. Do I spend my energy trying to mate and pass on my genes, or do I rest in the shade so my core temperature doesn't spike and kill me?
Wow, so the environmental stress suppresses their fundamental drive to reproduce.
Yes, and to really understand what happens when these biological and behavioral suppressions reach their absolute limit, we have to look at the ultimate behavioral sync experiment.
Oh, I know where we're going. Universe 25.
Yes. Between 1958 and 1962, the ethologist John B. Calhoun conducted an experiment that he called Universe 25.
He constructed an enormous enclosed artificial utopia for mice.
Right. They had unlimited food, unlimited water, no predators, perfect climate control, and zero disease.
The only restriction was physical space. It was basically a 101-inch square enclosure.
Exactly. So instead of the traditional stress of starvation or cold, the stress was extreme overpopulation and artificial hyperabundance. Calhoun wanted to see what happens to a society when all natural friction is removed, but population density just skyrockets.
And the results detailed in the sources are honestly horrifying. As the population density peaked around day 600, with over 2,000 mice in the enclosure, the social structure completely collapsed into chaos.
The male mice, who usually defend territory and court females, completely abandoned their traditional roles.
They just gave up.
The psychological weight of having thousands of neighbors with no space of their own caused them to just shut down. They became incredibly passive.
The sources mention a specific group, right?
Yeah, Calhoun labeled this specific group the beautiful ones because they isolated themselves in the upper levels of the enclosure and just obsessively groomed their fur all day.
The beautiful ones.
Right. They had zero interest in mating, fighting, or interacting with the society below them.
And while the males essentially checked out into their own isolated bubbles, the females exhibited a pure manifestation of the vipreet veda.
Exactly.
In the absence of male defense and structure, the female mice became hyper-aggressive. They had to take over the violent defense of their nests.
And this hyper-aggression short-circuited their biology. Their maternal instincts completely vanished under the stress.
Which mirrors what happened in 536 AD with the humans.
Yes, exactly. The female mice started abandoning their infants in the middle of the enclosure, completely forgetting about them, or in extreme cases, actively attacking their own young.
That is just bleak.
The reproduction rate dropped to absolute zero. By day 920, the entire population was functionally extinct.
Even though they had unlimited food and water.
Yes. And the scariest part, even when the researchers took some mice out so the population numbers dropped back to normal levels, they never regained their natural behaviors. The social software was permanently corrupted.
Which brings up an incredibly uncomfortable question for us. If the animal kingdom flips its biological and behavioral scripts under extreme ecological stress, whether that stress is a volcanic winter, scorching heat, or an artificial hyperabundance of space and resources, are human beings somehow exempt from this?
History and sociology tell us clearly that we are not. We are biological creatures subject to the exact same ecological and cosmic pressures.
Right.
If we look at the societal level, human civilization must also exhibit a vipreet veda when placed under existential crisis.
And this aligns perfectly with the ancient predictions in the Puranas. The texts state explicitly that in Kaliyuga, under Rahu's influence, the traditional male-dominated order reverses.
They predict a major shift.
Right, a shift toward female dominance. And they state that transgender individuals, or what the ancient texts call kinnar, or third-gender individuals, will become prominent in society.
Now, it is crucial to remember the analytical lens we established at the beginning. The sources argue these are not simply modern political trends or cultural whims.
Right, we're looking at this objectively.
They are deeply embedded historical survival mechanisms triggered by existential threats. When a society faces complete destruction, the rigid structures that built the society dissolve.
And the historical proof of this crisis-induced gender fluidity is intense. The sources point us directly to Weimar Germany from 1919 to 1933.
A fascinating period.
This was the period immediately following the utter devastation of World War I.
Think about the context. The traditional, patriarchal, hyper-militaristic structure of the German Empire had just led the country into complete slaughter. Millions of young men were dead, the economy was in hyperinflation, and the national psyche was absolutely shattered.
And in the aftermath of this incredible societal trauma, we see a massive behavioral mutation emerge in Berlin.
Right. In 1919, Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld founded the Institute for Sexual Science. And this wasn't just a quiet medical clinic. It fundamentally challenged the rigid biological order.
How so?
For the first time in modern history, we saw the issuance of transvestite certificates by the Berlin police.
Wow, official police certificates.
Yes, which legally allowed biological men to live, dress, and work as women in public without being arrested. The Institute also pioneered the very first modern gender affirmation surgeries.
And the source analysis suggests that this explosion of gender fluidity was, on an unconscious societal level, a profound psychological reaction to the war.
Exactly. Men were seeking to escape the traditional hyper-violent military roles that had just decimated their entire generation. The society was trying to shed the skin of the militaristic male just to survive the trauma.
But the tragedy of the Weimar Republic is how the society ultimately responded to this mutation. They didn't adapt to it. They reacted with extreme coercive suppression.
Right. In 1933, the Nazis took power. They viewed this fluidity as a profound threat to the strict militaristic order they wanted to rebuild.
So they crushed it.
They raided the institute, burned the research in the streets, and brutally murdered or imprisoned the individuals who had sought refuge there.
The society tried to force the old rigid order back into place through violent fascism.
Which, of course, only led them into a second, even more devastating global war.
Now, we see the vipreet veda manifest not just in gender fluidity, but also in extreme female hyperaggression when the male population is destroyed.
Just like the mice in Universe 25.
Exactly like the mice.
Yeah.
The most striking historical example in the sources is the Dahomey Amazons, known as the Agoge, in West Africa.
Right, this occurred in what is now the Republic of Benin, starting around the 17th century and really peaking in the 19th century.
And they were facing a demographic crisis,
A
right?
severe one. Endless, brutal wars with neighboring kingdoms, combined with their heavy involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, had completely decimated their adult male population.
They simply didn't have enough men to defend their borders. So to survive, the society completely flipped its gender roles. The kings formally incorporated women into the military, eventually creating an elite, all-female fighting force of thousands of soldiers.
But these weren't just token guards or a part-time militia. The Agoge underwent incredibly brutal psychological and physical training,
Training designed to do what?
specifically designed to strip away their traditional empathy and maternal instincts. The society needed them to become ruthless killers.
The historical accounts from French diplomats in the late 19th century are harrowing. I mean, to desensitize the recruits to pain, they were forced to run barefoot over fields of acacia thorn bushes.
It's brutal.
And to desensitize them to violence, young female recruits were forced to execute prisoners by beheading them, and in some rituals they were made to taste the blood of the fallen to completely break down their biological aversion to extreme violence.
They were also forced to take vows of celibacy, completely abandoning any traditional maternal or family roles.
But they were highly specialized, right?
Oh, absolutely. They had specialized, highly lethal units. There were elephant hunters, artillery women, and frontline fighters armed with giant, two-handed razors specifically designed to decapitate enemy soldiers in close combat.
So they were biological women forced by demographic collapse into the most hyper-aggressive, violent roles imaginable just to keep the kingdom from being wiped off the map.
It perfectly mirrors the hyper-aggressive female mice in Universe 25 when the societal structure failed. And you actually see echoes of this in classical mythology, too.
Which shows how ancient minds tried to process and warned about these societal inversions.
Right. The Greek myth of the Lemnian women is a classic example. According to the legend, the women of the island of Lemnos were cursed by Aphrodite with a foul odor, causing their husbands to reject them and take concubines from Thrace.
And how did they react?
In a state of extreme betrayal, trauma, and rage, the Lemnian women murdered every single man on the island in a single night.
They slaughtered their husbands, fathers, and brothers. And then they completely took over the governance, the farming, and the military defense of the island.
Or consider the Maenads, the female followers of Dionysus. In the myths, they would abandon their weaving and their domestic duties, leave their homes, and run into the mountains.
And what did they do there?
In a state of frenzied, divine madness, they possessed superhuman strength and would literally tear living creatures apart with their bare hands, a practice called sparagmos.
The story of King Pentheus in Euripides' play, The Bacchae, is probably the most brutal example of this.
Oh, definitely.
When King Pentheus goes to the mountain to try and stop this inversion of societal order, his own mother, Agave, is among the Maenads. In her trauma-induced madness, she doesn't recognize her son. She thinks he is a wild mountain lion.
And she and the other women physically tear him limb from limb.
The play ends with her marching back into the city, triumphantly carrying her own son's head on a spear, believing it to be a hunting trophy. It's horrific.
The psychological parallel here is what Jungian analysts call the Medea complex. In another of Euripides' plays, Medea is exiled and deeply betrayed by her husband, Jason.
And in response to this total isolation and trauma,
Right.
she murders her own children to inflict the ultimate pain on him.
Right. Psychologists view the Medea figure as the manifestation of the death mother archetype. When extreme social isolation and betrayal occur, it completely short-circuits the biological maternal instinct, turning the drive to nurture into pure, catastrophic destruction.
So we have seen two reactions to these massive social mutations so far. Weimar Germany represents a society trying to brutally suppress the change with fascism, which ended in ruin.
Right.
And Dahomey represents a state-sponsored military adaptation driven by sheer demographic terror. But the sources note that other ancient societies used a different strategy altogether. They used something called ritual containment.
Ritual containment is a really fascinating societal defense mechanism. Instead of fighting the inversion of gender roles or weaponizing it for war, these societies absorbed the vipreet veda directly into their religious structures.
They made it sacred.
Exactly. Look at the Scythians, the fierce nomad horsemen of the Eurasian steppes around the 5th century BC. They had a distinct class of priests called the Inaris.
The Inaris were high-born biological men who wore women's clothes, spoke with female affectations, and took on female shamanic roles.
Yes, they were the most powerful diviners in the culture. The Greek physician Hippocrates actually encountered them and hypothesized that this wasn't just magic, it was a biological adaptation to their environment.
Hippocrates argued that the Scythians' constant, brutal horseback riding, without stirrups, caused severe physical trauma and impotence among the aristocracy.
And in response to this biological damage, the affected men abandoned the hyper-violent male warrior role. But instead of being cast out or killed, the society absorbed them as highly respected spiritual figures.
The Romans did something very similar with the Galli, didn't they? The eunuch priests of the goddess Cybele.
They did. The Galli would participate in these frenzied musical rituals on the Day of Blood, where they would literally self-castrate, put on female clothing, and adopt female identities for the rest of their lives.
And in the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata, we see this fluidity woven directly into the mythology. You have the story of Shikandi, who is born female, raised male, and eventually exchanges their biological sex with a nature spirit to become a male warrior capable of fulfilling a crucial destiny on the battlefield.
Right. And you also have the great hero Arjuna, who spends a year in exile living as a third-gender individual named Brihanala, wearing bangles and teaching dance to a princess.
So the overarching theme here is adaptation. When populations face existential threats, whether it is the mechanized trauma of World War I, the demographic collapse of Dahomey, or the harsh physical realities of the ancient steppes, rigid gender roles dissolve.
They have to.
They dissolve into fluidity or hyperaggression to ensure the community's spiritual or physical survival. And the ancient societies that treated this as a divine mystery, giving it a ritual space, managed to survive for centuries without tearing themselves apart from the inside.
Which brings us to the defining challenge of our era. Past societies solved these mutations through ritual containment, putting these individuals in respected religious roles, or through demographic regeneration, where an outside population eventually came in to stabilize the numbers.
But what happens now?
Right. What happens when the crisis isn't just on one island or in one country?
What happens when the crisis is global? There is no outside population coming to bail us out of climate change or biological disruption. We have seen how past societies adapted culturally using religion or the military. But today, our primary survival tool is technology. Does this vipreet veda, this reversed order, apply to our modern medical science?
It absolutely does, and this is where we see the transition from social adaptation to profound physical mutation. We are in the machine age now.
Rahu's era.
Exactly. The vipreet veda isn't just about changing social clothes or adopting new religious roles anymore. It is about physically rewriting the rules of human biology and reproduction.
The advancements in assisted reproductive technology, or RT, are staggering. We are not just changing social roles, we are literally hacking the source code of human reproduction. Let's look at the medical realities of transgender reproduction from the sources.
Currently, the standard medical pathway for transgender individuals to have biological children involves fertility preservation before undergoing hormone replacement therapy.
Okay, so freezing sperm or eggs.
Right. For example, a trans woman assigned male at birth can freeze her sperm before starting estrogen. Later, that sperm can be thawed and used via in vitro fertilization with a surrogate or a cisgender female partner.
But the sources dive into a concept that sounds like absolute science fiction, yet medical ethicists and bioengineers are actively debating it right now. Autologous reproduction.
Yes. Autologous reproduction is the theoretical concept of complete self-fertilization.
Self-fertilization.
The idea is that a trans woman freezes her sperm, completes her gender transition, undergoes an experimental uterus transplant, and then uses her own frozen sperm to fertilize an egg provided by a donor.
And then?
That fertilized embryo is then implanted into her transplanted uterus.
Wow. It is as if humanity is untethering itself from the hardware we were born with. We are taking the reproductive process completely out of the hands of traditional evolution, but we need to be very clear here, based on the medical data in the sources. This is currently biologically impossible.
It is entirely theoretical at this stage. The sources stress that there is no natural or artificial system in human biology that currently allows for true self-fertilization.
Why not?
Primarily because you need viable sperm and a mature egg from separate biological sources to create a viable embryo without catastrophic genetic errors.
And the surgical hurdles are massive.
Enormous. While uterus transplants have been successfully performed in cisgender women, resulting in over 50 live births globally, no transgender woman has ever successfully received a uterus transplant transplant that resulted in a pregnancy.
What are the main blockers?
The anatomical challenges involving the vascular system, the hormonal requirements to maintain a pregnancy without native ovaries, and the massive doses of immunosuppressants needed to keep the body from rejecting the transplanted uterus. It makes it incredibly dangerous. It remains purely a theoretical bioethical debate.
But there are real-world milestones happening right now that represent a massive shift in the natural order.
Oh, absolutely. Consider Thomas Beatty in the United States. He is a trans man who retained his female reproductive organs during his transition and gave birth to 3 children using donor sperm.
And in Ecuador?
In Ecuador, Fernando and Diane, a trans man and a trans woman who had not undergone lower genital surgeries, conceived and gave birth naturally.
And in Kerala, India, a couple named Zia and Zahad made international history when Zahad, a trans man, actively halted his testosterone therapy so he could carry and give birth to their biological child.
These events are forcing a profound legal and demographic vipreet veda.
Right, because the legal systems have to catch up to the biology.
Now, the scientific consensus from organizations like the American Psychological Association is very clear. Having transgender parents does not artificially increase the likelihood of the child being transgender. Gender identity is an internal sense of self. It isn't inherited through social modeling.
But while it doesn't change the child's identity, the existence of these families is forcing global legal systems to reverse their traditional structures. Birth certificates are being successfully challenged in courts to change from the strict biological labels of mother and father to the gender-neutral label of parents.
It is legally altering the foundational definition of the family unit.
It is the ultimate societal adaptation. We are using medical technology to take control of our own evolution. And this biological hacking brings us to the final, most extreme phase of the Prakriti Yuga chakra.
If we return to our cosmological framework, the ancient texts explicitly state that in Kaliyuga, Rahu connects to civilizations via yantras.
And yantras translates to machines, engines, or technology.
Right. Rahu's era is defined as the machine age, and we are seeing the ultimate vipreet veda in how we survive physical trauma today. We are literally replacing our failing flesh with machines.
Let's talk about the mechanics of bionics, because we aren't just giving people wooden peg legs or plastic hooks anymore. We have the hero arm, which uses highly sensitive biosensors resting against the skin to read the tiny electrical twitches of the remaining muscles, translating those twitches into complex robotic finger movements.
And we are moving away from heavy, rigid robotics into soft bionics. Look at MIT's soft inflatable hand.
How does that work?
Instead of heavy metal motors and gears that break easily and weigh the patient down, it uses pneumatic air pumps and flexible silicone elastomers. It mimics the actual flesh and movement of a human hand, making it incredibly durable, lightweight, and cheap to produce.
And for lower limbs, we have complete exoskeleton systems like Rewalk or Indigo. Paraplegics, people with complete spinal cord injuries who were told they would never walk again, are strapping their legs into these robotic suits.
Yeah, the suits use advanced gyroscopes and motion sensors to balance the person, letting them stand up and walk across a room.
But the integration is going much deeper than just wearing a machine like a suit of armor, isn't it? The technology is becoming deeply surgical. Consider osseointegration.
This sounds incredibly painful, but the results are astonishing.
Walk us through it.
Surgeons are implanting highly biocompatible titanium rods directly into the marrow cavity of the residual bone of an amputated limb.
Straight into the bone.
Yes. Because titanium is inert, the human osteoblasts, the bone-building cells, don't recognize it as a foreign object. They naturally grow into the microscopic pores of the titanium, permanently fusing the metal to the human skeleton.
And then the limb attaches to that.
Exactly. The robotic limb then snaps directly into this titanium rod that protrudes slightly through the skin.
The crazy part about that is a phenomenon called osseoperception. Because the robotic leg is directly bolted into the human skeleton, when the robotic foot hits the ground, the mechanical vibrations travel up the metal leg, through the titanium rod directly into the human bone and up the spinal cord to the brain. The person can literally feel whether they are walking on carpet, gravel, or tile through a completely synthetic metal foot.
And to control these advanced limbs, we are fundamentally rewiring the human nervous system.
Through a surgery called targeted muscle reinnervation, or TMR.
Right. Surgeons address the severed nerves left behind after an amputation. A severed nerve wants to grow, it wants to find a target. If it doesn't, it forms a painful ball called a neuroma.
So the surgeons take that severed nerve, say the median nerve that used to control the hand, and they surgically plug it into a different muscle, like the pectoral muscle in the chest or a muscle in the thigh.
Exactly. When the patient thinks about closing their missing hand, the brain sends the signal down the nerve, but instead of reaching a hand, it makes a small section of their chest muscle twitch.
That chest muscle essentially acts as a massive biological amplifier.
Right, a surface sensor placed over the chest picks up that specific twitch and tells the robotic hand to close. We are rerouting the brain's software through different hardware to control a machine.
Okay, so we are replacing limbs and rewiring nerves, but what about the internal organs?
Yeah.
Because the sources outline some serious science fiction happening inside the human cavity.
We are creating internal yantras. For patients with total end-stage heart failure, we have devices like the Syncardia Total Artificial Heart.
What is that made of?
It is a polyurethane device that completely replaces the natural heart ventricles and all four valves. It is driven by pneumatic air pressure from a compressor the patient carries in a backpack, pumping blood through the body entirely mechanically.
But even more revolutionary than a mechanical pump is the UCSF bioartificial kidney currently in development. This completely blew my mind.
It represents the perfect hybrid of machine and biology. It is roughly the size of a coffee cup and is designed to be surgically implanted.
How does it filter the blood?
It uses a silicon nanopore membrane to filter the toxins from the blood, acting like the glomerulus of a natural kidney, and it is powered purely by the body's natural blood pressure. There are no batteries, no external pumps.
But the brilliant part is the second stage, the cell bioreactor inside it.
Right. The bioreactor contains actual living human renal cells that reabsorb necessary water and salts back into the blood, just like a real kidney.
How does the body not immediately reject these foreign cells?
Because the silicon nanopore membrane acts as a perfect physical barrier. It allows the tiny molecules of water and salt to pass through, but it blocks the larger immune cells from entering the bioreactor and attacking the foreign renal cells.
It is a perfect symbiosis of a mechanical yantra protecting living biology, requiring no immunosuppressant drugs.
And we are merging machines with our primary senses, too. The primo-retinal chip uses a tiny 2 mm silicon microarray implanted directly under the retina of a patient who has gone blind from macular degeneration.
And how do they see with it?
The patient wears a pair of augmented reality glasses equipped with a camera. The camera captures the visual scene, simplifies it, and shoots invisible infrared light patterns directly into the eye onto the silicon chip.
And the chip converts it.
Yes, the chip converts that infrared light into electrical pulses that stimulate the remaining healthy optic nerve cells, restoring basic, pixelated vision.
We are literally turning our eyes into infrared receivers.
Yeah.
And the final frontier of this vipreet veda is the brain itself. Brain-computer interfaces.
Like Neuralink.
Right. Companies like Neuralink using automated surgical robots to plant thousands of microscopic flexible threads directly into the motor cortex of the brain to read neural signals.
And we have even less invasive methods, like the synchron stentrode. Instead of opening the skull, surgeons push a flexible stent up through the jugular vein in the neck until it rests in a blood vessel directly over the motor cortex.
And it reads the brain from there.
It reads the electrical thoughts of the brain right through the blood vessel wall. Paralyzed patients are using these devices to move robotic arms, send emails, or type on computers purely with their thoughts.
If we replace our failing organs with silicon bioreactors, if we replace our bones with titanium rods and our nerves with infrared sensors and microthreads, at what point does the human end and the yantra begin?
We are fundamentally blurring the line between biology and machinery. The ancient text warned that Kaliyuga is an era of machines, an era of the reversed order. By fusing our nervous systems with titanium and silicon to defy death and biological limitation, we are embodying the ultimate vipreet veda.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. For you listening, we started by looking at a cosmic clock, the Prakriti Yuga chakra, and Earth's alignment with the L2 Lagrange point, the shadow planet Rahu.
We saw how this cosmic shift aligns with massive climate megadroughts and volcanic winters, which trigger brutal sociobiological chain reactions.
We examined a biological vipreet veda where painted turtles and bearded dragons flip their genetic genders to survive thermal stress, and where mice in an artificial utopia abandon all maternal instinct.
We saw how human societies, under the crushing weight of demographic collapse and war, invert their traditional gender roles from the trauma-induced fluidity of the Weimar Republic to the hyper-aggressive survival tactics of the Dahomey Amazons.
And finally, We saw how humanity is hacking its own reproduction and surgically fusing with technology to survive the limitations of our own flesh.
This brings us to a crucial historical lesson. History shows us that civilizations that tried to brutally suppress these biological and social mutations, like the Romans outlawing the Galli, or the fascist destruction of Weimar Germany, ultimately collapsed or caused immense violent trauma.
But societies that found ways to adapt, to integrate these changes, whether through ritual containment or sheer resilience, survived the chaos.
As we enter the peak of this cosmic transition, the peak of Rahu's influence, consider the alternative perspective.
What if the very things that seem like terrifying chaos today, the blurring of traditional gender roles, the reliance on AI, the literal fusing of man and machine,
What if they aren't signs of our destruction? What if they are the exact evolutionary life rafts nature designed to help us survive the cosmic shadow?
it forces us to reconsider our disorientation. Perhaps we aren't losing our balance. Perhaps the ground itself is changing and we're just learning how to walk differently.
I love that.
The next time you look at the news and feel that systemic vertigo, don't look at it purely with fear. Look at it as the unfolding of an ancient cosmic blueprint. We are adapting. We are surviving. Thanks for taking the plunge with us today. Keep questioning, keep adapting, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.